We have the Sami Zayn segment with Bobby Lashley's sisters. Now, I was warned by many of you in advance not to watch this show, specifically because of this segment. You warned me. Got emails from people. Stay away. Of course, I watched it anyway. I had to talk about the show. How can I talk about a show I don't watch? Almost $2.5 billion being paid to this company between Fox and USA, right, for these new TV deals. If I were Fox and USA, I'd be shaving some zeros off that after watching this segment. Of all the weeks to put on a segment like this takes balls. This takes brass balls, let me tell you. You know, there are two big observations that I came away from this week. After all the news, the TV news and everything this week, the more depressing observation is that there has never been another point in WWE history where fan feedback and fan input has meant less than it does today. In so much as the influence on the creative direction of the product is concerned. Okay, because they do their little fan council surveys, and they do solicit feedback about network shows you'd like to see and that kind of stuff. They do that, okay? But I cannot think of another period in history where fan feedback meant as little as it does here in 2018. No matter how good or bad the product is from week to week, it just doesn't seem to matter. They get $1 billion from Fox and a few $100 million from USA, and nothing else matters. That is the most important revenue stream for this company. And the reason why, by the way, putting Raw and or SmackDown on the network was never, ever a viable option. For all the mailbox questions that were sent in to me over the years I've gotten about this, okay, let this be a lesson why Raw or SmackDown, short of being canceled and them having no other place to put it, were never, ever going to be on the WWE network. In effect, the network was created as a failsafe in case something like that ever did happen, because they came very close. They were in a perilous position many years ago at Raw where, you know, they almost did not have a home for Raw. And, you know, they didn't play their cards right in their negotiations with USA. They had to settle on a worse deal, and they didn't control their ad money anymore. And so I think that was part of the mindset. And Vince, I think, even may have talked about this publicly, that never again were they going to put themselves in that position. And that's when sort of this idea of the network began to really bubble up, because you want to make sure you have a home. You have some place to go, God forbid, in case you do get canceled, something happens, what do? But it was never, ever it was always a last resort. It was never a viable option. Why would you put your own shows on your own network when you can score hundreds of millions of dollars in TV money from a major network? It never made any sense, but I would always get questions about that. But the problem is, when you have this kind of money being thrown around like this on these TV deals, now they can just coast. They can give us more segments like this if they really want to, and it doesn't even matter. They can do it just for shits and giggles, and they know it won't matter, and that to me is the most depressing takeaway from all of this TV news. It's great for the company. You would hope it's great for the wrestlers, all that money. Maybe it'll trickle down to them. Maybe. But for the fans, I look at this and I say to myself, that to me is the most depressing takeaway from all of that news. Now, my other observation, because there were two, and whether or not you find this depressing, I think is really up to the individual. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing myself, but I don't think that there has ever been a point in WWE history where this idea of the guy, or having someone as the face of the company, has meant as little as it does today. Has been as unimportant as it is today. People can boo Roman Reigns until they turn blue in the face. Brock Lesnar can be an absentee champion who shows up 5 times a year, and it just doesn't seem to matter. You know, when Hogan was on top, when Austin was on top, even Cena, the company really did revolve around those guys in a lot of ways. They lived and died by them. I've always said I do think the idea of just one guy that you build around is incredibly stupid, especially with how many times these guys get hurt. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Why not build up 3 or 4 different people who could fill that role? I do think, for example, right now, Seth Rollins could very capably fill that role. But yeah, and actually right now they have a few people, frankly. I mean, it's not just Rollins. They have AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Daniel Bryan. I mean, I think they're in pretty good shape right now as far as big names, as far as between both brands. But this idea of the guy in the face of the company, it hasn't worked out with Roman. Okay, you could be a big Roman fan. You cannot deny the fact that it has not worked out the way that Vince McMahon would have hoped. It just hasn't. And you could say that it's unfair, it's not right. Maybe so, but it hasn't worked out, right? And that's okay, because guess what? The machine just keeps on going. The machine keeps on going. They're still making money hand over fist. It truly is the brand itself that sells, and it's not any one individual talent anymore. It really is. Even Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey was one of the most popular, well-known, athletes, not just female athletes, but athletes in the world. All the Google searches for her and big pay-per-view buy rates that she did in UFC. And look, I mean, she hasn't done much so far, and I've actually been pretty impressed by her performances overall. And I think she'll get better over time. But even Ronda now, it hasn't taken very long. Ronda doesn't feel as special as she did a couple of months ago. And we knew that would happen. The more often she appears on television, the less special you are. That's why there is something to be said for Brock Lesnar only showing up a few times a year. I know it's annoying as shit. Maybe people wouldn't be as upset about that if he didn't have the championship and he was just an attraction who popped up every now and then. Then I don't think people would mind as much. But even someone like Ronda just sort of in a way feels like just another person on the show. It's not as though, Ronda's this huge name and we're going to build around her and she's going to really carry this brand and Raw's ratings are going to shoot through the roof. No. It really isn't about any one person anymore. And is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I think there are arguments that can be made on both sides. But this idea that the company can be rewarded with billions of dollars, to produce television like this, because I got to bring this all back to the Bobby Lashley, Sami Zayn segment here. The fact that they could be rewarded with billions of dollars for stuff like this, and to be fair, it's not always this bad. It's one segment. But this is far from the only time they've produced the equivalent of what I would call a television dirty bomb, which is what this was. And they have absolutely no incentive going forward to not do it again or to make things better or give two craps what any of us have to say. I find that to be severely depressing.